from my experience, just being in the tech world and owning a SaaS platform, that's like Christmas every day.
If you're planning on vibe coding, if you're planning on selling to enterprise, you need to do X, Y, and Z first before anything, which is most likely getting security and getting making sure it passes certain internal tests and all of that.
If it's me and we launch something, like we vibe code it out and we validate it, that's like a dopamine hit, right? Whenever you have like 100 people sign up, the last thing you're going to think about is, oh, cool, let me pause that and let me go back to the product and start, reworking it and making sure it's plausible to scale. No, you want like the next 100, the next 100, and the next 100.
You should get validation with your product as soon as you possibly can. The inability to think holistically about the platform and about the product from a design perspective and from that UX perspective that we all know is super, super important, right? The best products in the world have usually been led by design because we're truly obsessed with making sure that the design of the thing, the UX of the thing is as wonderful as it can possibly be. A lot of these companies have vibe coded an MVP into existence and maybe validated it with users and are now looking at this from a design perspective and recognizing, shoot, we have a bunch of these friction points and our users are getting frustrated here and here and here. And that's only if you can talk to actual people and get that feedback. Or if you look at some data and you see where the hangups are.
AI agent for design, an AI agent for tech, a CTO. Those are all AI agent concepts that I guess in my mind were just baked into one vibe coding platform, and they can all speak to you and fix whatever each other's doing, in terms of work and say okay, well, we got to figure this out. Well, from a UX perspective, this is wrong.
To be able to prompt something into existence and then go back and kind of tinker with it and say oh, the user experience isn't quite great. And from a designer's mind, it might be easier to do. But from somebody else who might not have that experience, it might be a little bit more difficult, which I'm just wondering, it's at what point do we go back to design first, then build, and then you refine it, and then you launch it? We'll talk about vibe coding a little bit, state of design right now, because it's never been more different. It's really, really different to build stuff right now. And then I think it would be interesting to talk a little bit more about what we're seeing from customers coming in and how their design needs shift so much depending on what breaks, I guess. And then I think you can talk about Mately and that experience and how you had to shift things around to focus on what needed fixing.
Yeah, maybe vibe coding is what starts the direction, and then from vibe coding you enter this MVP. Never been easier. You start to get validation. What that looks like is probably not spending ads, just other more manual ways since it's vibe coded. And then that turns into what happens when you're needing to scale, or what happens when you just don't even you leave the vibe coded version out and you're just building on that and trying to scale without properly taking a step back and putting the finishing touches on that. If it's me and we launch something, we vibe code it out and we validate it, but that's like a dopamine hit, right? Whenever you have 100 people sign up, the last thing you're going to think about is, oh, cool, let me pause that and let me go back to the product and start, reworking it and making sure it's plausible to scale. No, you want the next 100, the next 100, and the next 100. And then eventually somewhere you're going to pop or something's going to break, or all the things that we were kind of warned about from the Wild Codes team for Sprout as an example. We kind of first row learned.
So what you're saying, there's real discipline, product discipline that needs to take place after you vibe code your MVP.
Probably because you just, if you think about it as a business owner, you put the work into vibe code it out. You're so giddy, you're excited because your cost is, nothing. What a subscription, maybe some
Bolt.new, $200 a month.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
It's next to nothing. You spent months trying to figure out and learn how to vibe code. You did it yourself. It's launched. You've shipped it out. It's connected to a database. It's live, and you're just grinding and getting customers. And I think of that as, just from a business perspective, a bit of a dopamine hit, right? Each customer feel good, feeling all the time. Boom, another customer, you're feeling it. More customers are piling in. It's cool to start, small. It's totally fine. The platform, the foundation, the structure supports that. But at some point, I would assume at some point you have to come back and revisit the structure and the foundation because you vibe coded it out. You need to get an engineer in. You need to spend the money on a database architect to come in there and properly redo it. Guess what? That means that you're not spending your money on marketing and more customers. And I'm not sure if that's a popular action. I'm not sure. What I'm thinking happens is you get validation. It works, right? That's also a rare occasion that it actually works. You get validation and you keep chasing that and chasing that and chasing that. You get more customers and more customers. You get to a breaking point and then they probably come knocking on our door, probably shortly after knocking on an engineer's door, right? Either our door first or an engineer's door first. And we come in and we're mocking everything up on Figma because that didn't exist before. We're starting designs from scratch because the platform has just been vibe coded out. There's no intentional design. There's no UX research behind it. And here we are starting from scratch for a already built platform, which isn't great because that means they're spending money now on something that should have been done before. New features. How are we adding new features?
Yeah, adding new features, but then also taking that holistic approach that wasn't taken in the beginning. And, I come from the belief that you should get validation with your product as soon as you possibly can. Usually would take 6 months to get an MVP built. You can now do it in 6 days, which is amazing. It's incredible. What you usually face with a 6-day MVP build is not necessarily cutting corners, but the inability to think holistically about the platform and about the product from a design perspective and from that UX perspective that we all know is super, super important, right? The best products in the world have usually been led by design because we're truly obsessed with making sure that the design of the thing, the UX of the thing is as wonderful as it can possibly be, from the actual beauty of the UI to the actual user experience. So you're taking something that would normally take a little while and you're condensing it down, and you're typically not thinking about the UX holistically. So what ends up happening, to your point earlier, is a lot of these companies have vibe coded an MVP into existence and maybe validated it with users and are now looking at this from a design perspective and recognizing, shoot, we have a bunch of these friction points and our users are getting frustrated here and here and here. And that's only if you can talk to actual people and get that feedback. Or if you look at some data and you see where the hangups are. And then they recognize, okay, these are the 3 or 4 things that people get hung up on, come to us, and we kind of think through them from that design lens. What we have also seen is stacking features because it's so easy to build on top of these vibe coded platforms. And all of a sudden you're just stacking these features one after another, after another, after another. And you could have a whole new feature set in 2 days, which then adds more complexity, not only to the back end, to the actual product itself, but more complexity to the UX. And it's really hard to bring it all together back to zero. Think about this from first principles. Think about this from the user's perspective. Hey, can I accomplish what I need to accomplish using this platform? And usually it's yeah, we can accomplish it, but it's a pain in the ass. It's not a great experience.
I even think I'll just go back to dopamine hits, right? Just hammering out new features. From my experience as a tech world and owning a SaaS platform, that's like Christmas every day. And it did take months, right? It would take months to design something, develop it, QA it, deploy it, test it, et cetera. So I'm thinking okay, that new feature set, I can probably vibe code it out in a day, right? That's 5 new features in a day that I can immediately add. That's just dopamine hit after hit right there. Just, oh, wow, I just pushed that out. Jack told me Jack, our customer, told me they were looking for this. Boom, vibe code it out. And you just keep stacking and stacking and stacking. And maybe I'm wrong. I don't think that the discipline is there to where people are stopping where they should and saying, okay, I got traction. People are talking to me. I know there's a feature set I have to build and deploy for them to make them happy and attract more users. But we need to stop and we need to look at this holistically. We need to make sure that we're doing it right. We need to make sure that we're not just stacking features and there's flows that are broken, inconsistencies in design that cause ultimately a big, big expensive mess. Because We've had that. We've had people knock on our door that, you open up their attempted Figmas or just maybe just the platform itself. You just jump directly in and it's just leading to dead ends, flow after flow. It just doesn't make sense.
Yeah.
I don't know how often and prominent this is. I can imagine myself going down this route, just being able to roll out feature set after feature set and satisfy those customers and just get the dopamine hit and then get more customers. And then suddenly I realize there's a problem whenever the tower starts crumbling and, there's clear churn with clear reasoning around, confusion on how to use the platform, way too complex, couldn't set up my business or couldn't set up my account. Those are clear signs that something's wrong.
Oh, totally. Totally. And this is in the MVP phase, right? It's like you're going from MVP and you get that validation that we're talking about. And now you're starting to stack. So this is still like super, super early days. And what's so amazing is we have the ability to build something in 6 days instead of 6 months. People, non-technical people like us can jump in and get something technically, quote unquote, built. I mean, we don't know what we don't know. So it's like there could be a lot wrong with what we built, but we can build it and we can test it and we can go get it validated. But this is in such like the early stage. Do you think that, just because I think this is an interesting segue, because you can get these MVPs built so quickly, at what point do you then go, do I need to raise or can I continue to bootstrap? Can I bootstrap this thing and get my first 10 paying customers to then be able to afford the first engineer to come on or the first design team to come on? Or should I use this sort of momentum and this traction to then be like, all right, I don't want the headache of bootstrapping this thing and literally pinching pennies. Let's go raise a little bit because this idea clearly works and it's clearly interesting to a lot of people, potential users. So it's like now we have a working MVP that we can then take to raise or pitch or even sell to actual customers. I think the whole industry has changed.
Yeah. And I mean, there's a lot to that. I think that depends on your resource pool. And I think that if you can't get to 100 customers by bootstrapping, well, you just shut it down, right? Like
Interesting.
There is no reason why anyone shouldn't be able to get to 100 customers. And unfortunately, anything lower than that's not, the viability is just getting there. I don't think you can say it's viable. It's a great idea. It's gone off the ground, but lower than 100 just means, you still have a long way to go. And then unfortunately, for the second point, even at 100 customers, you're not going to be able to afford, a proper engineer. Probably I go back to that resource pool. Like who can you tap into that's around? Maybe it's a one-time cost for someone to look over everything that you've done and give a suggestion, explain what's wrong, what's going to happen later in the future, what your database should be like, all of that stuff that you need to know that maybe you and I wouldn't know because we're not technical. And then oppositely to that, if you are technical, you probably need to spend a little bit of that money to get a proper consultation on the UX side of things, proper consultation on marketing. Maybe that's not your specialty, right? You should probably tap in your resource pool and get someone to chime in that is an expert in, let's say, marketing design or development that can bridge that gap that we currently experience with AI, where it's like, yeah, you'll get 80% there. And then you have to kind of fill in the gaps yourself, that extra 20%. And in this case, with vibe coding, you're able to plug in some gaps. Maybe you're Googling stuff, you got tips, and maybe you're able to just kind of get it to 90%. But I'm pretty sure those numbers probably vary, but I'm pretty sure there's just like we experienced, like we tried doing this. We tried doing this for our own portal, for our own customer portal. We tried to play around with vibe coding and seeing what we can build. And we quickly were told that there was a lot of things that we needed to take in consideration from a development perspective that we had no idea. And we could have easily connected to the database, tried to launch it, maybe successfully launched it, and then probably find all these little pain points later on as we scale and we get more clients onboarded. So I think it comes down to getting to 100 customers. And at that point, because you're asking for, like, at what point do you have to step back and try to assess the situation and see if you're going to raise, what you're going to do, continue bootstrapping it. I think you get to 100, tap into your resource pool, figure out what the future looks like, and then make a decision based on that. Are you okay with a slow crawl? You have everything set, all the knowledge, or are you trying to just explode? If you're trying to explode, unfortunately, that requires cash, which means you're getting rounds.
Yeah, interesting.
That's how I would do it.
Yeah.
personally. I'm not sure how many people tap into a resource pool. I feel like most people would quickly jump into raising money just to keep the momentum, just to get the speed going. I'm not sure. I don't know how prominent it is to take it slow, tap into resources, get knowledge, try to build your own team out, bootstrapping it. I would say at this point in time, with how fast things can be brought to market, people want to continue that, speed, and they probably go to raise. That's what they've seen. All their buddies raised, all their buddies have startups. That's what I see happening all the time. I would go with that being probably the paved path for most.
Yeah, I think it largely depends on the type of business, obviously. We're talking about products. So we're talking about some sort of SaaS or some sort of platform. Maybe it's an app. So like you have a bunch of these different types of businesses that would require different needs. If you are shooting for the moon and if you're going after enterprise clients right away, probably not going to be able to get there bootstrapped just by thinking about security and logistics and all of that. But you can also ask for 10 grand versus $100 a month. You're talking about an enterprise solution versus a small business solution. And if you're purely interested in going after enterprise and you need all of these, the sophisticated security and make sure you have the right auth in place and all of that, it's like you might need some money to hire the best and to hire a team that can pull that off. I think it just depends. I mean, getting the MVP off the ground though has just never been easier, and it's really, I don't know, it's pretty exciting to see it happen. I mean, you can get a product, you could build a product, you can get it in front of customers, totally bootstrapped in weeks. It's amazing.
That kind of makes me think, because I associate vibe coding with just the product that's not enterprise level, right? I just associate it with typical SaaS platform, scheduling, whatever it is. I think for that type of platform, I think if you don't have 100 customers, I don't think it's a viable business. For enterprise level, I mean, that makes me think like, what's
you only need 10.
I mean, yeah, not even from a customer count perspective. I'm just thinking like, what's the barrier? Like, can you build enterprise software through vibe coding? That's so complex, so complex. You're talking $10,000 a month for software. That means it's solving, Fortune 500 company issues on a large scale. Like, what's the limit for vibe coding something like that? I don't think that.
Yeah, you mentioned complex. Sometimes it doesn't necessarily need to be complex as a product necessarily. It can solve one thing and do it really, really well. But what they're paying for is obviously the outcome and the solution, but they're also paying for the, I guess for lack of a better term, it's like the security, knowing that you can plug this in, knowing that it'll pass all of their internal tests, make sure it makes their way through and solve that problem. And that usually can be expensive to build.
No, for sure. Yeah. I can, and I'm thinking they probably have a totally different path, in terms of how they go from vibe coding this out if possible to hiring engineers. Maybe that path doesn't exist without raising, because you can't do something as complex on the back end as we're talking about without having an engineer. Maybe for enterprise level software, I'm thinking looks and aesthetics isn't as important as we were just talking about functionality and security. So maybe there's that aspect to it. I'm not sure I've seen or heard discussion about anyone vibe coding out anything that's enterprise level. Everything that I've seen so far has just been out of the box, little SaaS platforms and ideas.
Yeah. I feel like we should get somebody on to talk about that. Have you ever vibe coded a product to an enterprise sale?
Yep. That's
right.
That's a super good topic. I haven't seen it, haven't read about it.
Yeah.
Not qualified enough
if anybody's out there listening that has successfully started with a vibe coded product, and you could have hired a bunch of engineers later, but started with a vibe coded product, validated it in the market somehow. Maybe you have some intros to some CIOs or something at some of these enterprise level companies, maybe built out a team, but eventually got a contract with one of these enterprise level companies. We want to talk to you. Come hang out.
100%.
Come tell us about it.
I got to hear the story.
Totally. And some of the pitfall, there's got to be some things that you need to avoid, or some lessons learned, some very maybe in hindsight obvious things that you skipped over that, if you're planning on vibe coding, if you're planning on selling to enterprise, you need to do X, Y, and Z first before anything, which is most likely getting security and getting like making sure it passes certain internal tests and all of that. Super interesting.
I would also say, like, I'm thinking enterprise level, right? So I'm just thinking of Fortune 500 companies. I don't know average employee size, right? But it's going to be in the hundreds. Average clients or whatever the business is selling. What I'm trying to get at is there's going to be tons of traffic. So it's never going to be more important to set up your database and to make sure that it's set up in such a way structurally that it's able to hold that traffic and not break. Because I know that's huge from my experience and what I've seen with especially talking to other tech startup founders. Like that's a huge problem. If that backend isn't set up correctly for scale, it's set up correctly to start with, which is great. When you get past like, I don't know, like let's say 200 customers on a regular platform like scheduling management tool or something like that, people are clicking, dragging things. There's different profiles, different permissions. They're creating events. Things can fall apart if the database isn't set to scale. And I'm thinking for Fortune 500, that's probably, critical that backend is set up right, because you're just going to dump so much traffic on it immediately, which is not how you normally do it, right? Normally you get one client, two clients, maybe a business, maybe you're B2B, but the businesses are relatively small and medium sized, but you dump a product on an enterprise business, they flood it with, their entire company, it propagates through
potentially. And that was another thing I was going to say is like, talking with my buddies who do work at these enterprise level companies, most of the company doesn't use the same tools. Like, sure, there could be tools that are used throughout the org, but it's like the small little sales team and I say small by 15 people, like this small subset of the sales team uses a completely different tool set than this side. They're not talking to each other.
Yeah.
They're using these tools because it solves one problem that they need solved and they can justify the expense. They have budget for it, whatever. But these guys over here, even though they're still under the sales department, they don't use it. They don't need it. They've never heard of it. They don't even communicate with each other. So it's like you do potentially have, but in order to get approval for that tool from sales team A, to use that tool, it still needs to go through the whole test. And I don't want to say like there needs to be a procurement person to come in and like get it set up and everything. Sometimes you do, but like it's still got to pass certain internal security tests and make sure that it passes. And there's only 12 people using the tool, but it's still quote unquote sold to enterprise.
Yeah, that's a good point too. That happens. That was my experience when I was working for a Fortune 500 company. Within the sales department, depending on what kind of a salesperson you were using different tools because it's just the nature of it, So yeah, that's a good point. I don't know. I do think though, I'm not sold on vibe coding from enterprise level yet. Like that seems far fetched. I'd love to have somebody on here that talks about it and teaches us and introduces us through the entire journey, including the hardships. But I do think there's a world where, just based on what we've seen and in our experience, where if a platform like Bolt can simplify explanations and fill in the gaps for, which I feel like it's pretty close, but still, again, that 80-20 thing, 80% of the way there, 20% we got to fill in the gap. If there's a way to make these platforms speak to a non-technical person and guide them through the build and plug in those technical aspects in a very non-technical conversational way, and it connects the front end to a back end based on what we wanted to do in the future for scale, let's say, or thinking about scale. I think a world exists where that happens. And then suddenly you do have complex MVPs that have been thought through, right? From a UX perspective, from a design perspective, from a feature perspective, right? That's another thing that maybe you're not thinking of when you're vibe coding is just the flows of all these features that you want to build out and all the little touch points they have to different modules because of crossover. I think that time is kind of around the corner.
I think it's around the corner too. It's exciting. And, this episode, we're going to publish this episode in early July. It's early July now, 2025. Yep. And
July
by the
1st.
time somebody watches this in September, like we could be eating our words. It could just be like, oh yeah, Bolt.new just figured this out, or Lovable just figured this out, or potentially some sort of partnership with Figma where you have you now have the
Yeah.
ability to start with designs. You don't start with a prompt, but you actually start with designs. And by using Figma Make, which is incredible, you start with those designs that your design team has already figured out. And you now have the ability to go prototype that and build it out using some connection to either Lovable or Bolt.new, which exists. I mean, there's the Figma integration, but I'm thinking on the deeper level, which to your point, Moni, is like, once you can make sure that all of those checklist items that a seasoned, experienced engineer would go through and be like, no, man, we need to fix this. We need to fix this. Backend is not set up properly. Like, as soon as we can figure all of that out with the design side and then like connect the two, my God,
Yeah.
like this is
what happens then?
It's what happens then. What happens then?
I don't know if it's good or bad. I mean, we go back to that talk about just everything being AI agents, because what we're kind of talking about here is having a AI agent for design, an AI agent for tech, a CTO, having an AI agent for as a CEO to advise. You know, those are all AI agent concepts that I guess in my mind were just baked into one vibe coding platform, and they can all speak to you and fix whatever each other's doing, you know, in terms of work, and say like, okay, well, we got to figure this out. Well, okay, well, from a UX perspective, this is wrong. That's just what everything's going to be an AI agent at this point, right?
And that could be the new, like, again, going back to what we were saying, it could be the MVP. The model of an MVP is going to change a lot. I still think there's going to be a need for us fleshy humans.
Oh, for sure. Yeah, for sure. For sure.
To going back to like Brian Chesky's point from Airbnb's, he spoke at Figma's conference a couple of years ago. He's like, more designers should start companies, because what he was getting at is a designer is the user, is the advocate for the user, which we've talked about, but it's also like they're really kind of obsessed with the way things work and the way a user might work their way through an experience. So they design this experience. And on one hand, you have an AI prompting or a prompt to build tool like Lovable or Bolt.new to be able to prompt something into existence and then go back and kind of tinker with it and say like, oh, the user experience isn't quite great. And like from a designer's mind, it might be easier to do. But from somebody else who might not have that experience, it might be a little bit more difficult, which I'm just wondering, it's like, at what point do we go back to design first, then build using Figma Make? It's like design first and then you build it and then you refine it and then you launch it. Is like,
I don't know.
That going to be the new way
I don't
to
think
do it?
so, because from our experience, I mean, we've seen so many clients come in here, they're just product focused. If you can just do both at the same time, they would just do both at the same time, with product focus being leading the way, development, I mean, leading the way. I mean, I can't see some paradigm shift happening to where, you know, design comes first across the board. It's kind of always came second, or, you know, from what my experience has been. I mean, even myself kind of, and what we've seen from clients. I mean, not too many coming in with starting off in ideation, right? A lot of them coming in, you know, midway. They've built it. They've never had anyone step in and design it and properly look at it and properly mock up the screens, properly mock up feature functionality, roadmap wise. It's always kind of in second place because, and I understand that, because in my mentality, as someone who just has experience in tech, like I would have and was just product focused. Like, I need an engineer developing, like right now. I'll worry about design later. Hey, by the way, as you're developing, can you just kind of like bat an eye on it and just make sure it's going, you know, in the right direction that we need it to go? And you end up with a mess. But that's kind of been what we've seen and what I've experienced myself. What I do think could happen though is, because given the speed and evolution of design, or of AI, that we've seen in the last like 2 years, I think we could be just so wrong here that it could just evolve into something so insane that it does end up thinking like a human being, and it does end up replacing designers and maybe multiple other jobs, just like it has been lately. You never know. At the speed that it's evolved to this point, I think maybe we're just not able to really mentally comprehend what it could be within a year or two, because none of these companies are going to stop pushing the limits. They're going to continue.
Of course. I think a good example of that actually is what OpenAI just did with their integration with HubSpot. Have you seen this?
Yeah, dude. Yeah.
You talk to your HubSpot CRM in ChatGPT.
Yep.
You just ask like, hey, give me the status for these 10 leads here. Like anything I should be paying attention to. And it just pulls all the information from the HubSpot database and gives you the information.
I wonder like later, like what the landscape, and I say later, but again, it's going to be like around the corner, like what the landscape is going to look like, right? MVPs get built out. Bolt fixes this 80-20 issue. And let's say it gets to 95% completed, just like you would have done yourself. Like it's thinking like a human, 98%. MVP gets released. It really doesn't need to have it be looked at again, or it's all built to scale. You're good to go. You can just full force punch it. What happens with the tech world? Like, are we just going to get flooded with products and platforms and it's just going to become saturated? MVP standards, are here. Now they become like some level of complexity that's way beyond what we currently have because AI is building it. What happens with the entire tech industry at this point? Like what's a valuable company at that point? Like what would have garnered, let's say $1 million investment from a VC. Now it's worth like $500 because you, me, and my neighbors can go build it in like a day.
Totally.
What are we doing? Like what happens? A collapse?
When speed to market is no longer like a differentiator, what becomes a differentiator? I have a hot take on this. Actually, it's not even such a hot take. You can kind of predict it. Design becomes the moat. Design and brand becomes the moat because we are obsessed with making sure our products are as intuitive and beautiful and easy to use as possible. The brand itself is recognizable and interesting and different. And the distribution is taken care of through marketing and go-to-market strategy and stuff. But design, I think, becomes the moat.
Yeah. Again, that's assuming that one thing doesn't happen where we're just not able to conceive what kind of direction AI will evolve in next. Like, is it actually possible for me to be talking to Tristan AI right now? Like everything you've said is from an AI agent that I've been talking to on a podcast, right? I feel like that's probably something that's possible that we're just choosing to say right now, AI won't catch up to us. It won't be able to have that human touch, but I don't know.
I believe the short term is design is going to be the moat. And I say short term because I'm predicting 5 years. And maybe we're jumping ahead and you're thinking in 5 years, software as we know it is not going to look anything like software looks today. Software
maybe
might
not the look.
Well, by look, I mean just like the way it's organized and structured.
The layout. Yeah.
The fact that we're interacting with a browser and with SaaS tools in that browser. That's the way we currently do it. But in the future, it could look a little bit more like the integration that OpenAI has with HubSpot, where you are just using ChatGPT as a terminal to interact and to chat with everything. All of your quote unquote tools, you're using ChatGPT or another form as a hub, as a way to interact and a way to talk to all of these databases and all of these pieces of software. So like no longer is HubSpot the product, HubSpot product, HubSpot.com no longer is what you interact with on a daily basis. You are interacting with it through a third party. And that third party happens to be ChatGPT or happens to be an AI, happens to be maybe Siri, who knows? Like who knows what's going to happen? But like software itself might change / go away.
I mean, you say 5 years, like just go the other way, reverse it, reverse 5 years.
I know I should be.
In 5 years, we can't even begin. Like there will be Tristan and Mony AIs that are doing podcasts, I think in 5 years.
And 5 years ago was 2020. Like 5 years ago was the start of COVID. Yeah.
Start of COVID. Everyone was suffering. World's ending. Now we have like full blown AI stuff that's taking over it's wild. So I think that comment's correct. I just think it's like a year out probably. And then anything past that. Yeah, dude. Yeah. I mean, just again, think back 5 years and think about where we are now. Like no one was talking about AI 5 years ago. You and I weren't discussing AI and how to utilize it. We weren't doing that. And now it's permeated our lives to no extent. I mean, even my parents who are 75, my dad's best friend is ChatGPT.
Nice. He's got a buddy.
Yeah. And my mom's best friend is ChatGPT. My wife's best friend is ChatGPT. I'm second place.
This was a good topic. I think it's topical. I think we can talk about this every time and have new insights, different and new spins. Places to new places to go with it. But I do think this is good. And we're just talking about product right now. We haven't even talked about marketing or anything else. But yeah, man, this is solid.
Good stuff.
This is solid. I like it. Glad to have it back going again.
Glad to be back.
Thanks for listening, everybody. Glad to be back. Spring Studio Spotlight Podcast. Let's go.
Thank you, guys. Looking forward to seeing that enterprise vibe coding expert on our next episode.
Get in touch if you have any experience building an AI, especially vibe coding, a successful product. Get in touch. We want to chat.